Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's project. I'm not real sure what happened to the first minute or so of video, but during that time I smooshed each pad that you see there, the Distress Oxide pads, into my art mat and spritzed it with water. Then I swiped the tag through the Distress Oxide ink a couple of times until I was happy with the way that it looked, and then I dried it with my heat tool. I ran this embossing folder through without shims once, and it didn't take, so here I am using a couple of shims, which are just two pieces of paper. They are parts of a paper pad backing that I cut down to fit in my Platinum 6. And this is a Darice embossing folder called Fall Leaf, which you can find at Joann's, and I put a link in the description box. While I had my die cutting machine out, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my focal word, Explore. This paper is a scrap that I had left over from last year's fall collection from Graphic 45. The embossing folder did cause the paper to crack a little bit, but it didn't bother me because of what I am doing right here. I'm just rubbing this paste gently over the tag, and that's kind of covering up where the paper cracked. This is Artsy wax paste in bronze, and I don't know if they have a rose gold, but if they do, I think that also would have looked really good. Just rubbing it over the raised areas of the tag, and it's sticking to the embossed surfaces and really calling attention to that detail. And we're going to finish up the background for this tag by inking the edges in Walnut Stain Distress Oxide. And it probably would have been just fine to use the regular Distress ink in Walnut Stain, but I had the Oxide out on my desk already, so I just went ahead and grabbed that. This die cut gave me a heck of a time figuring out how to incorporate it in the tag without it getting lost against the background, and the technique that I landed on, I've done it once before but not on YouTube, and I hope you guys like what I ended up doing. First, I thought I could just ink the edges and that would help it stand out, but as you can see, it's still getting lost against the background. Fall calls to mind cozy sweaters, warm cups of coffee or hot cocoa, and fireplaces, and if I've got a fireplace and a warm cup of coffee going, I'm probably curled up in an armchair reading a book. So I grabbed one of my newest Deep Red Stamps library books, and I stamped it out in Ranger Jet Black Archival ink for watercoloring. Now I'm going to use my regular Distress inks to do some watercoloring on the stamped image. First I'm going to add a wash of antique linen over the whole thing. Then I'm going to add some fall colors like aged mahogany, rusty hinge, and crushed olive, just because I never seem to use crushed olive. So I thought I'd go ahead and incorporate it in this project. Now that I've got the first layer down, I'm going to go ahead and heat set it. And once it's heat set, I go back over the shaded areas with color one more. Actually, I think I went back over them 2 more times and then heat set it again. The color did start to bleed a little bit, but that doesn't bother me. I kind of like that part of watercoloring with distress inks. If you prefer to have your watercolors stay put through multiple layers, you probably want to use regular watercolors and not distress inks. Before I fussy cut the image, I like to rough cut first. That just takes the larger pieces of paper off and gets them out of my way so that they don't interfere with the fussy cutting. I'm pretty well done with the stamped image, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere it to the tag, and once it's all affixed to the tag, I'll have a better idea of what to do with the Explore die cut. Here I am inking the edges again and looking at layering it over the books, and at this point I'm thinking about dusting embossing powder around the edges of the word, and that might have been awesome. And then I remembered a dragonfly die cut that I put on a tag last year and decided to repeat the textured embossing process that I did with that die cut this time. The first step of the textured embossing is to get the entire die cut covered in clear embossing powder. So you just smoosh the whole thing into your embossing ink pad and then lay it on a sheet of scrap paper and cover it in embossing powder, and then pick it up with a set of tweezers. Sometimes if you're able to get to the second round of embossing, because this is a double embossing process, if you're able to get to the second round of embossing fast enough, you don't need to re-ink the die cut. The powder is still semi-melted and it'll grab more powder. I didn't get there fast enough this time, so I ended up re-inking it and repeating the melting process. Act fast now. While it's still melted, press a rubber stamp into the semi-melted surface. You don't want to do this with acrylic or photopolymer stamps, they'll melt. As long as the embossing medium has started to cool but is still warm and a little gooey, you can press red rubber into the texture and not damage the stamp. You can kind of see the texture that has been added by pressing that stamp into the semi-cool embossing medium, and now I'm just adding silver wax paste over the top of the embossed image. That just helps draw some attention to the texture. Now I'm going to glue it down and leave an acrylic block resting on top of it to make sure it doesn't warp or curl up. I'm going to finish the tag up with some sequins and Tonic Nuvo drops in key lime. Thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out some of my other videos on my channel. And if you would like to see more like this, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks!